All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. The Bitcoin miners have been on a bit of a run. We're going to talk about what's going on there. We're going to talk about two Bitcoin miners that are up over 80%. We'll take a look at all of our normal charts, week to date, month to date, year to date. And of course, we've got to talk about Ethereum. So if you're new to the channel, we talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners all the time here. If that's content you're interested in, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if everybody could do us a big favor and smash the like button, it does help the channel out a lot. We're going for 500 likes on this video, so I want to thank everybody for all the likes we've been getting over the last several months. It's made a huge difference. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the Bitcoin miners. Okay, first chart I want to take a look at is what happened last week with the Bitcoin miners. So this is a short week in the United States. I'm making this video Tuesday before the market opens, and of course the market was closed in the US on Monday, so the Bitcoin miners have yet to make a move this week. In pre-market, it looks like they're doing okay. But let's get to what happened last week. Okay, so this first chart is last Friday over the previous Friday, and you're going to see the Bitcoin miners had a giant week last week, and this is the continuation of a trend that's been going on for over a month now. We're going to take a look at that chart next. So as always, you're going to see Bitcoin in gold on the chart here. You're going to see Bitcoin was up 3% last week, so that was a decent week for Bitcoin. We did have a recent breakout to the upside, and we're having a little bit of consolidation again, but a nice week for Bitcoin. But more importantly, 15 of the 19 Bitcoin miners that we track did outperform Bitcoin, and some of the Bitcoin miners had a gigantic week last week. So let's start at the top of this list. You're going to see two Bitcoin miners were up 30% just this week. Core Scientific up 30%, Iris Energy up 30%, and it's worth noting, these are two of the larger Bitcoin miners, so these were big moves for big Bitcoin miners. Right below that, we do have a bunch of more micro-cap sized Bitcoin miners. Mawson was up 27%, Eni was up 21%, Gree was up 19%, so Eni and Gree finally did have a good week. They've been struggling really year to date. BitDigital up 17%, and Bitfarms up 15%, so those were the leaders. A few were lagging behind, and they were more of the microcap stocks. Argo Blockchain was actually in the red, down 5%. DigiHost in the red, down 8%. Those were the only two Bitcoin miners that were red last week. DMG Blockchain was actually break even at 0, and HUT was up only 1%. So there were four that did lag behind Bitcoin. But this is another week where a lot of these Bitcoin mining companies did 5 or 6 or 7x what Bitcoin did. So that really, you're going to see when we get to the year-to-date chart, that is a trend that's going to need to continue because the first several months of this year were brutal for the Bitcoin miners. Having said that, we are now about 5.5 weeks into a trend reversal. So that's the chart I want to go to next. So here you're going to see we have a few Bitcoin miners up over 80%. This chart measures the last 5.5 weeks, and that is from the date April 16th. April 16th was a low for almost all of the Bitcoin miners. We talked about it on that day, and in the few days following, we seemed to feel like that was a pretty good chance that that was at least a local bottom, and I thought that bottom would hold. And as you can see, we're now 5.5 weeks later, and for the time being, it has held for all 19 Bitcoin miners. And for some of the Bitcoin miners, the bounce off of that bottom has been tremendous. So at the top of this list again is Iris Energy at 88% in the last 5.5 weeks. Stronghold is up 85%. Now that is a micro cap stock, but they did announce their intention to potentially sell their company, and they got a big bounce off of that. So they're having a good run. Core Scientific up 82%. So again, Iris Energy and Core Scientific are not microcap stocks. By exahash, both of these companies at the end of the year should be in the top 5 Bitcoin miners. So these are big moves for, top 5 Bitcoin mining companies, but you're going to see some other big moves as well. Notably, Marathon's up 49%. They are the largest Bitcoin miner by market cap. So 49% move in the last 5.5 weeks is a strong move for Marathon. Then CleanSpark, which is the second largest Bitcoin miner by market cap, they're up 29% in the last 5.5 weeks, and Riot is up 31% in the last 5.5 weeks. So in that same period, you'll see Bitcoin in gold is up 10%. Bitcoin is up in this period of time. It's still not back to its new all-time high at just under 74,000, but Bitcoin does seem to be holding strong, and it did have a nice bump up in the middle of this run. So there's only two Bitcoin miners that are lagging Bitcoin in this 5.5 week window of time, and they are Argo Blockchain and Hive, but they are both also now in the green, up 4%. So I'll give you a minute to take a look at your Bitcoin miner, but most of the Bitcoin miners on this list are now up over 20% in the last 5.5 weeks. So like I said, this is actually just the beginning of what needs to happen in order for these Bitcoin miners to have a good year in the year 2024, because the first 3.5 months of the year were not good. All of the Bitcoin miners, except for CleanSpark, were in the red in a pretty significant way in the first 3.5 months of the year. So April 16th seems to have marked a turning point. Last week was no exception. In fact, last week we seemed to pick up some momentum, so we're gonna have to wait and see what happens this week. Let's take a look at year to date. Okay, so year to date, we now have a second Bitcoin miner that is in the green. CleanSpark's basically been in the green. They've been up all year long. They have been outperforming their peers significantly just as far as their stock performance goes. So in a period of time where Bitcoin is up 65% year to date, you're going to see CleanSpark is up 60%. Those two have been neck and neck all year long. And then we drop off to Iris Energy, which, as you've seen, has had a monster run lately, including 30% just this last week. That leaves them now in the green for the year, up 10%. So what we're waiting for is some of these companies to start to flip from red to green. On April 16th, which is the date of the chart we looked at last, 18 of the 19 Bitcoin miners were in the red, and they were pretty significantly in the red. So now you're going to see a bunch are getting much closer. In third place, we've got Cypher down just now 1%. So a good week this week, and that will be in the green as well. Marathon, the largest by market cap, down only 10%. Core Scientific, 13%. TeraWolf, 14%. So they seem to be leading the way. There's a bunch of these down between 30 and 45%. So they have a longer way to go. And this is why I say, even though the last 5.5 weeks have been very good, you're going to see year to date, there's still a lot of work to be done here for the Bitcoin miners. And then we have a group of 5 at the bottom. We have Gree down 56%, Stronghold 58%. That despite the fact that it's up over 80% in the last 5 weeks. Even with that run, it's still down 58% year to date. Mawson down 58%, Any 62%, and Argo Blockchain 63%. So the market is definitely still extremely worried about those 5. So this goes along with what we've been saying really for the last 18 months on the channel. I do think there's going to be winners and losers in this space. We're starting to get a little bit of clarity, I think, on which are going to be which. Of course, still only time will tell. And we're still fairly early, I believe, in the 4-year cycle here. We did just get past the halving, so the typical time that these Bitcoin miners start to run is still ahead sometime over the next really year potentially. And of course, that's what's happened in previous cycles. So there's no guarantee that that is going to happen in this cycle. Okay, this chart compares Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners versus their highs in the previous cycle. So that is back to November of 2021. So you can see as of Friday, Bitcoin was really almost exactly where it was at its previous all-time high, which was 69,000. Bitcoin is now caught up. It's been flat. Actually, recently, a month and a half ago, Bitcoin did get as high as almost 74,000. So it has broken out of its previous all-time high. But in the same time frame, there's none of the Bitcoin miners that are anywhere near their highs from the previous cycle. So CleanSpark is in the lead by far. They're down only 25%. That is a significant lead over their peers, but still off of their highs from the previous cycle. Cypher now down 59%, so they are in second place, but still a lot of work left to go. And then from there, you're going to see a group down between 70 and 80%. So a couple of noteworthy ones. Marathon's down 75%, and Riot is down 78%. So I've been saying on my weekly updates, really at this point in the previous cycle, both of these companies were down approximately 80% off of their highs from the previous cycle. So this cycle seems to be going very similarly to what happened last time around in 2020 and 2021. And then at the bottom, you're going to see we've got a bunch of Bitcoin miners. We have 4 in particular that are down between 98 and 99%. So I feel like it's very hard to imagine a scenario where those get back to their previous all-time high. So of course, nothing is impossible. And then we have a bunch in the middle. So I do expect some of these Bitcoin miners that are down even in somewhere between 70 and 85%. I think they do have a chance if these Bitcoin miners operate at a high level and execute their growth plans that they've laid out. I do think a bunch of these stand a good chance of recapturing their previous all-time high, but you can see there's a massive amount of work left to be done for them to get there. So obviously that will also be dependent on what Bitcoin does in this cycle. Until Bitcoin has a breakout, it's still hanging out around its previous all-time high. So typically, the Bitcoin miners don't hit their new all-time highs until Bitcoin itself has that new run and hits a new all-time high. So what I would say, I do think for the Bitcoin miners, it's going to be a game of patience. We are seeing a 5.5-week trend of the Bitcoin miners moving in the right direction. We'll see if that continues. I think that the rest of this year is going to be positive for the Bitcoin miners, but of course, this is not financial advice, and obviously that is going to be highly dependent on a bunch of factors, including what Bitcoin does and the execution of these companies on their own plans. Okay, just to take a look at what happened last week across the market real quickly. So on this chart, we compare the 4 US major indexes along with the 2 largest cryptocurrencies and the 2 largest commodities, which are the precious metals, gold and silver. So of course, Ethereum was the big winner on the week last week, up 21%, and that is because the spot ETFs got approved. We're going to talk about that in just a minute after this chart. Bitcoin was up 3%. The NASDAQ was up. The S&P was about break even, and then the Russell and the Dow were actually down on the week. So the US indexes were a real mixed bag last week. A couple were up, a couple were down. And then you're going to see silver and gold were both red on the week. So silver down 2.3% and gold down 3.3%. Silver and gold have had an outstanding run. We'll take a look at year to date next. But the one thing worth noting is the Russell down 1.2% continues to struggle and lag behind the other indexes. The Russell is the one I keep my eye on the most closely as it relates to the Bitcoin miners because they tend to move in tandem. So whereas the other 3 indexes, the S&P, the NASDAQ, and the Dow, are at or near their all-time highs and have recently broken out to new all-time highs, the Russell is nowhere near its previous high from about 3 years ago. So it is still lagging behind, so we're waiting for that move. Okay, just to take a closer look at why Ethereum had such a monster breakout last week, up 21%. You're going to see this article, Spot Ether ETFs received official approval from the SEC. So last week, the SEC approved all of the Ethereum ETFs. That was a surprise to me. We did get a little bit of a heads up on this. On Monday, some news came out, and all of a sudden, everybody started to price in that the spot ETFs were going to get approved. So it was a big move really on Monday and Tuesday of last week, which was prior to the ETFs actually getting approved. But it is worth noting, if you scroll down, I did highlight a sentence here, while the 19B-4Ss have been approved. So that's the form approving the spot ETFs. The ETF issuers still need the SEC to sign off on their respective S1 registration statements for the spot Ether ETFs to officially begin trading. Industry analysts say that could take days, weeks, or even months. So I did check on this again this morning, and I still see people talking about sometime between weeks or months. So we don't know when these will begin trading. They are approved, so this will happen, but we don't yet know when these will begin trading. So although this did get a big bump on the news, really the buying hasn't even begun yet for these ETFs. So I do think there's some potential catalyst ahead down the road. We're just not sure exactly when that will be. Okay, lastly, if we take a look year to date, you're going to see the cryptocurrencies are still outperforming by far year to date. Bitcoin up over 64.5%, so 65% on the year. Ethereum now up almost 63% with the big move it had this week. Those two are by far and away the winners so far this year, but you're going to see silver up 27%. This is one of the best years silver's had in the last 25 years. Gold is up 13%. The NASDAQ is up 12, almost 13%. The S&P's up 11%. So a lot of these are behaving very well. The Dow is down at 3% and the Russell is up only 2%. So everything is in the green, but you're going to see even year to date, the Russell is lagging its peers. This is a very encouraging chart. Everything is up quite a bit so far this year, and that really was not what people were expecting coming into the year 2024. So we still have a lot of year left. We'll see where we go from here. We're just about finished with the 5th month. That leaves 7 more months. So we'll see where things end up. But for now, obviously the cryptocurrency is doing very well. The precious metals, silver and gold, doing very well. And the indexes, 3 of them very near their all-time high. So that's it. That's what I've got for you on Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners, the Ethereum ETFs, and the market overall. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, if you made it this far, please do us a favor and smash the like button. And if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next video.